I was a while ago part of a debate regarding awareness and history and the past. And some of the people were arguing about past leaders' behaviors, and they were judging them on, well, based on a more modern approach. And one of them asked the question, about Muhammad, the prophet of all Muslims. And well, there were other people, other personalities, like Genghis Khan and the such, that were discussed, and obviously they were portrayed as criminals. But I said, like, some people turned to me for some reason, because I was capable or willing to answer some of the questions that people seem to just be circling around. So I took the question head on and said, see, the most important problem nowadays is that we are judging things of the past. And we are doing it from a completely different perspective, from a completely different, not only mindset, but from a completely different awareness. See, a lot of people think that people in the past were much wiser. Well, if some of the older civilizations were wiser than us, where are they? If they were wise enough, they would have withstood the test of time. Now, when we look at things, at most leaders, how they are portrayed, well, I don't see too many signs of awareness and too many signs of, you know, inner well-being within most of those figures. Many of the figures of different countries that have made it into the pages of history were either despots or conquerors or people who committed genocides here and there. Their nationality doesn't matter, honestly, because in the end, history is very mystified. And ultimately, what is history more than just, writings of the winners, right? And nothing else but a collective agreement of the winners on how to shape it to better fit their egos, and then forcefully fed to the, younger generations to believe. Now, the very simple point is when you judge such people, a lot of people easily get subjective. I told them, see, maybe for you Genghis Khan was nothing else but a ruthless criminal, but maybe for their tribe, they were nothing else but a huge hero. See, even when you look at the world how it is today, there are villains, and obviously there are, let's say, good people. To the villains, someone who commits the better, I don't know, genocide maybe, or the better terror attack, or whatever else, obviously there will be a hero, someone to follow, because this is how life functions. Life will always tend towards something that is better, but life doesn't have any awareness, right? It doesn't have any, let's say, discernment, better said. So, to an evil person, doing a more hideous act obviously is a way for them to convince life to push all its energies that way. The reason why people live in dependencies and they can't get over karmic cycles is because they do something so much that they have convinced their life that is the way. And so life invests all its energies into that, creating a deeper and deeper cycle. So it is harder for people to pull out of it. That is why a lot of people go mad when they overthink things again and again and again. See, the boundary in between sanity and insanity is very thin. When people force themselves so much in the world, who knows? Maybe one day they may cross the border of insanity, and we don't know where, what may happen afterwards. When we look, for example, at more complicated personalities, because a lot of people invest into those, not because there was too much complexity. See, when you take, for example, the Prophet Muhammad of Islam, see, a lot of people point them out in a very negative nature because, things regarding his youngest wife, things regarding a lot of other aspects that he was also a slave trader and the such. But if we are to look at history from a purely objective way, white people did not invent slavery as you are probably being taught in schools. Yes, there were obviously a lot of hundreds of years when whites nations actually used black people as slaves, but let's not forget that black people lived there for, well, thousands of years before white people even came there. And let's not forget that they fought one another as well. When a tribe wins over the others, what is the first impulse? Well, typically, if we speak from an animal perspective, you kill all the males, you kill all their children, and then you mate with the wives to ensure your own lineage, right? This is what things happen. You don't believe me? Well, look at how lions, for example, act and how some other animals also do. In case you forget how life functions, just look in the animal realm and you will see there's not much change. And at the same time, there's not much of a difference in between how animals function in their subconscious way and how we also function when we allow ourselves to be controlled and dominated by our subconscious aspects, by our impulses, right? When you look in Asia, when you look in Africa, when you look at Europe also, there has been kind of almost everywhere, probably not everywhere, but in most places, slavery was a part of that, of each society through the medieval ages, and why not maybe in the ancient times as well, for the longest time. Maybe some societies didn't take slaves, maybe, but there were definitely some lower castes which were more or less slave-ish because, well, they were somewhat disregarded, most likely, and obviously they had to work more for their existence. But that was still a point. Yes, let's not forget Asia had their, societies. Africa had different societies, and Europe had different societies. But in the end, slavery was also a part, more or less, of most countries' behavior back in the times. What does a slave mean? Well, if I am to put a short definition, a slave means if I don't like you, I'll either break you into submission or I will kill you. Weren't the Middle Ages and ancient times like that, right? There wasn't much awareness or much humanity within those. If someone woke up and wanted to do a sandwich and it would fall flat on the floor with the honey sides fall on the floor, well, they'll probably get so mad they would want to kill half of the world's population, right? That's how misery has been and, well, unfortunately still is. So when we are to look at different personalities, let's not judge them too harshly because one has to understand those were the times. That was that time's normality. Even when we look nowadays, some things were normal a few years ago or were not normal, and then they swapped to being normal or no longer normal because, well, different agendas impose their own ideas or different generations impose or want to impose their own idea, despite the backlash from previous generations or the such. See, if Muhammad would have behaved in a way that wouldn't have been normally or morally accepted by their own society, most likely they wouldn't have lived, or probably they would have been shoved away from their society, right? I'm not saying those things should be treated as normal nowadays, because our awareness is much greater and the such. But I'm not sure why people flare up so much about such old behaviors, because obviously, let's face it, Muhammad wasn't the only one with such behaviors. When you look at emperors, kings, and the such, well, in the end, they were still slave traders as well. Because when an emperor would conquer a new land, what was the first thing they would do? Destroy its culture, take part of its population as slaves, a little genocide here and there. So honestly, I wouldn't think that, such smaller personalities that had more of a local influence should be treated, as ruthlessly as something else. I always tell people, try to take religion and things with a grain of salt, because what the people did in their own lives, well, it simply matters more or less, because you don't know. Are you really sure that what is written in a book is the actual truth? Don't forget, history is more or less a collective agreement. And what is written in a book is ultimately part of history. So it may not entirely be true. As years come, you've seen that things are getting out of the darkness, and 2025, I assure you, a lot of secrets will be coming out for humanity. So be ready to embrace completely different points of view. Maybe you will hear that Jesus wasn't even born in Jerusalem. Because, well, if one reads the Bible, I don't think there is anywhere written in there that they were actually birthed in Jerusalem. They came to Jerusalem at a certain age because they had a certain mission. And we know they didn't have a good relationship with the Jewish people in there because he actually broke down all their businesses and he sent them away from, the father, telling, from the church, saying that he's turning the church into a market, right, into a business. And Jesus, for example, is not the, pure, kind man that we are taught, especially as Christians, in the books, right? He was more of a fighter. He came there with a specific purpose. He wasn't wandering around there, chilling around, right? He was a fighter. But in Christianity, you're taught to be meek because, well, some people have been using Christianity as a means to socially engineer people into, subservient beings, so that later on that can be capitalized. And you're seeing today how things have turned. Islam was also used as a means to make people in a certain way, and you will see in the end how things will turn. Things don't necessarily need to be spoiled because if people are not ready to hear a certain answer, well, they will simply disregard it or laugh at it. Now, if we are to think at all generations have had their ills. All generations have had their little Hitlers, let's say. It's just that only one made it to do whatever they did, right? In each generation, there's been a Stalin, a Genghis Khan, and, well, honestly, if we think a bit about it, there have been thousands, if not even millions of those, right? In every one of us lies one of those. The point is, focus on what each has done, because a ruler will do a lot of damage to their surroundings, but if they are a true ruler, they will always seek to do good for their country. Countries that have been slave trading, they have been slave trading to make sure that their own populace has a much better way of life, and they get to work less while having others do their bidding. Yes? Corporations function in a similar way like that, because it is neocolonialism. They come to your country and they make use of your help because they call you cheap labor, right? How does a corporation call you? Well, they call you human resource because you don't count as much more than that. So in the end, if you think times have changed too much, it's still in a way the same normality. It is just that it is well more camouflaged, right? If someone back in the times was a slave trader, well, they would present themselves as such. Nowadays, slave traders present themselves, with all sorts of titles, right? CEOs, titles that cuddle one's ego, right? But they don't uplift you in any other way. Those cutesy titles are only good to distract you from your mortality, because once you end up as a senior engineer, you're probably gonna think that, hey, look, I'm almost immortal, I'm a senior engineer. Well, I bet on your cross or whatever symbol your burial mound will have, I bet it will be written senior engineer on that, right? So the point about judging others based on their societal norms, but from a more modern, recent approach, this has always been going on. See, even your parents are judging you because you're a different generation. You have different tastes, you have different aspects, and the times are different. A lot of parents are pulling down their children because they still live in a silly world which no longer applies today. I don't care about my parents telling me, or especially my grandparents telling me how things were in fucking communism. Communism is over. Well, to a certain extent, because we still live in a very veiled version of it, but still the point is we can't care much. Those times are somewhat over, and newer things are on the horizon. Newer trends are here. Newer technologies, newer opportunities are here. Back in those times, things were dim. Today's things are dim in people's souls as well, but there are more possibilities, more things one can do with their life. So a lot of people simply ask questions, but they feel too weak or afraid of providing the answers. A lot of people tell me, why is it that you pick up questions and answer them, even if they are very controversial? See, controversial means that a lot of people are fighting for something, but they're too cowards to take up the great fight, right? To put things, on a plate and show their own points of view and their pieces of evidence and pit them against other people's pieces of evidence, right? And, reach a general conclusion, a final conclusion, where one of the sides has the more right. Because in some cases, the truth can be correct with several sides, not just one, right? But it is much more profitable to pit people ignorantly one against the other, and then you have a war. When people fight for something that they have never experienced and they're just believing, well, that's why you get religious wars, that's why you get political wars, that's why you get all kinds of wars, right? So when it comes to things like this, don't bother with judgment, because judgment means you have some bits of knowledge, you have some bits of ideas, but you haven't experienced those times. You haven't experienced those things, right? Even as a judge, you are presented with some guilty people, but you don't know exactly if they are truly guilty, right? A lot of the judicial processes are fake because the system doesn't like some people, so, well, they will be charged with, you know, fake deeds. Or in some cases, some people invent things, and, well, the judge has to take a decision based on the evidence that is brought to them. If any of the evidence is fake, well, I'm not sure if you can blame the judge for that. So judgment is a true thief of joy in the end. A lot of people judge because judgment only comes out of expectation in most situations, kind of in all situations. Judgment comes out of expectation. If you expect something to happen and it doesn't happen your way, obviously you're going to start inventing and bringing out all sorts of reasons as to why not. People who play games, they can see that a lot, right? I'm talking about video games, right? A lot of people have expectations that something will stay the same way because it's their comfort zone. If something exists and it's broken, it is overpowered, and it existed for long enough, when it is finally toned down or nerfed into oblivion, well, all of them will start inventing those, millions of pages in which they say that what was nerfed was, not taken correctly into account, and this and that, and whole drama blows the whole planet above out, right? Or, well, typically Reddit and Twitter and probably some of these platforms where the keyboard warriors exist. See, things change. Change is the only constant. If you refuse to change, well, you'll be broken one day, right? And nobody's going to care about that. That is something that a lot of people have to understand. Nobody will care if you break, because in the end, you're nothing else but numbers to this sick society. So the point is, why would another number care what happens to the other number? Numbers are ultimately nothing else but concepts that we have created. We could have created whole different numbers. They changed the calendar once a long time ago, and they added January and February, right? So they can change time, they can play with variables, they can play with meaning every time they want, all the time that they want, right? We humans can do that, because ultimately we have to understand meaning is not something you have to take truly into account. When it comes to people in the past, take into account the not necessarily their deeds, but the virtues that they have portrayed. What is it worth following? Their deeds? Well, probably you're not as magical as Jesus was, or you don't have their powers, or you're not able to predict things like a prophet would. But ultimately, you can still live your life from the point of, the virtues that people have left behind. And I leave to each and every individual to figure those out. Because I'm not interested in living life the way other people in the past told me. Because I'm not interested in being a copycat or a follower of someone else. I am capable of understanding a few things about my human system from my own self, from my own readings, from my own, let's say, capabilities. I can go out in nature and find some answers for myself. And well, that is no problem to me. Happy New Year. Have an awesome day. Hopefully, this video raised a bit of awareness. You are appreciated. Take care. Enjoy life. Stay awesome. Keep cuddling the world with your vibe. And this being said, Ferenc Board signing out.